And those people, giving back to those people who do not have, uh, that naturally would not have the ability to go out and buy an apartment complex.
Right.
You know,
Right.
what I did was essentially I was able to marry something. I really want to impact the people that I care about back home. And I really want to provide them an opportunity to better their lives in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if that's making jeans that they then wear, but this vehicle of real estate investing
Mm-hmm.
is by far the best way that I could do that.
One, good day, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to you, whoever and wherever you are. I'm Oliver Perry, and today I've got another guest and a fellow soldier, a hero, a husband, an investor, a real estate investor, Mr. Bo Goebel. Bo, say hello, man.
Oliver, how you doing, man? I appreciate the intro. I don't necessarily agree with hero. I'll agree with all else, though.
Listen, it's not up to you. This is my show, so I'm gonna say what I want, and I think you're
You
fair.
run
So
it. You
therefore,
got it.
yeah, there it is. So all right, Bo. So I wanted to make sure I got Bo on today to talk, and we wanted to talk a few things. But before we get started, I want to make sure Bo had the chance to introduce himself to you, the audience, and we can go from there. Go for it, Bo.
Yeah, brother. So I appreciate it. My name's Bo Goebel, born and raised in Southern Indiana. Very fond of my hometown and my people back home. Um, really have the values instilled in me as a child, and the people that have loved me and taken care of me, kind of drive me. That's where I'm passionate, is providing back to that community and to my people. So um, that kind of went to school to play football. Also graduated, thankfully, and shortly after that, joined the army. Always knew that I wanted to serve the country before I had dependents, and then lo and behold, met my wife about 6 months into my career in the army. So
Nice.
it wasn't necessarily the entire time without dependents. Actually, the majority of it has been with dependents. But yeah, I've been an infantry officer for about 8 years. Super fulfilling job. Extremely grateful for all the opportunities that I've had in this career field, and also, that moves you around a whole lot. The
Right.
real estate is kind of um, something that just comes up. And for somebody like me, whenever I started out, basically we moved up to Nashville for the 101st, and I couldn't stand how much money I was paying in rent, right? And that's literally the basis of, hey, I'm going to get into real estate, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I would say a lot of people are there. A lot of people are there.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, hey, I don't understand this real estate investing thing. I don't understand what's a good investment, but I do understand my mortgage is less than what I should be paying in rent, and I'm buying an asset, and then I'll hold it and rent it out for a few years, sell it whenever it's opportune time, or and that's kind of where my mindset was once I purchased that property, though, and transitioned it to an investment property. That's whenever a light bulb went off,
Right.
and I saw what passive income was, um, and became super passionate. Found my passion in real estate, uh, and decided in 2018 that I would, you know, commercial multifamily or apartment buildings is the asset class that I would pursue
Right.
for so many reasons. And since 2018, been through some failures, had a couple victories, and currently sitting with 141 units of assets under management with my team and I, and just south of $10 million. So,
Let's go, Bo. Let's go,
um,
Bo. Sorry, it made me excited. I got excited. Go ahead.
no, it's exciting stuff. And honestly, as you know, Oliver,
Mm.
as we sit here and record this, it was less than a week ago that we closed on our second 68 unit complex. Um, so it's been extremely another very fulfilling ride the past 3 years, 4 years now that we've been pursuing this thing. So
So let's dive right in, man. So one question that is itching me personally is one thing that I don't think we all realize or understand is how difficult it is to get past that first year or so. For you, you said for the past 3 years has been really fulfilling, but prior to that, I know it had to be frustrating. How did you deal with that frustration and that annoyance of you could see the end of the tunnel, right? But you're not getting there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an awesome question. I would say that the vast majority of people are very intrigued by real estate investing and they see some of the good things. But once they run into those walls that inevitably every single person that I know that's been successful runs into and overcame,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's whenever the gut check comes and it's like, hey, what are you doing this for? So you cannot start without that why, without that burning desire and being tapped into, hey, what is the ultimate goal?
Right.
And I promise you, if making money in my experience, if making money is the number one goal, you're just not gonna you're not gonna outlast the because you're getting beat up left and right.
Yeah.
You know, just under $10 million of assets under management is something that's very humbling to me because 3 years ago I was trying to put a 6 unit under contract, that cost $180,000 and didn't know my left foot from my right.
Right.
So, it's just something that you got to persevere. And the only way to do that is to stay on the grind and understand that, it's a long journey. And you have to know your why and, circle back to that often. Put it somewhere on the fridge, next to your office. When you wake up, you read it, you review it every day. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. That seems to be a common theme among most real estate investors and really just entrepreneurs in general. All of them say, that why is the biggest thing. Now, for you, what is your why when you look at it? When you look back at that, what is your why?
man, yeah, I love that. So, I I think a lot of people tie it to family, and I do tie it to family to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think it's so much deeper than that. So, man, this is going to get deep. So, um, I I was born in 1988 in America to a family that loved me. I never wanted for anything. We definitely were not rich, but my dad's one of 17. My mother's one of four.
Whoa.
Just such a supportive, loving group of people that I was constantly surrounded by. You know, um, I grew up in atmospheres around sports that my old man taught or coached, and learned a lot from a lot of people that I aspire to be like still. Um, and those people, giving back to those people who do not have uh, that naturally would not have the ability to go out and buy an apartment complex.
Right.
You know,
Right.
what I did was essentially I was able to marry something. I really want to impact the people that I care about back home. And I really want to provide them an opportunity to better their lives in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if that's making jeans that they then wear, but this vehicle of real estate investing
Mm-hmm.
is by far the best way that I could do that and present them opportunities to, invest alongside me and my team and the safest, best wealth building vehicle available.
Right.
And so, in order to marry that, that's what it's very easy to take some shots to the face or some kicks while you're down.
Right.
Whenever you've got a burning desire
Mm-hmm.
that is that big, to be honest with you, Oliver, and this is I want to be worthy of, I truly believe that we will impact millions of lives in a very positive way on our resident side, on our investor side,
Right.
like, with our partners, we're impacting millions of lives, creating millions of memories for people that live in our properties.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a whole lot of businesses that you can do that in such an impactful way. And so I'm very connected to that. That's what drives me and gets me up every morning. So,
I love it. I mean, that's wow. I mean, that is as deep as you said it was going to be. That's really cool, man. That's really really cool. Now, with that being said, though, how have you seen what you've done so far start to impact the community the way you want to? Because I think that's one thing that you particularly and anybody else who's investing in that with that mindset in mind you have to take that time to celebrate those it will everybody else might see them as little, But for you, probably for me, and probably for anybody else, you see that one guy who didn't have a home when you left, and now he's got a spot, and his spot is at one of your apartment complexes. What's the one thing that's kind of hit you so far since starting on this path that you're like, okay, yeah, I'm doing right?
I'll tell you what, no, I really appreciate that question and the way you frame that, because the majority of the time you're not running into good situations, right? You're putting out fires.
Yeah,
It's like anything, right?
yeah,
There's a grind aspect to it. Um, However, I will say it's been a whole lot of fun uh, in this first year of ownership of a 68 unit that we have in Southern Indiana,
mm-hmm.
because it didn't have a good reputation. It was not ran with the amount of care that we put into it. And some people that currently live there that have uh, and lived in town, actually, our on site manager specifically, she lived in town for, 6 years.
Okay,
And she straight up said, I would never, ever go to this apartment complex. Just because it had a bad reputation. Not the worst in town, but, a person of her quality would not live there.
right.
She lives there now so happily. And she sent a text a couple months ago, before in 2020. And she said, congratulations. We just moved in a police officer, which was a goal of ours as well.
Wow.
Um,
Now wait.
you've
Now before
you've
you
officially
before you
you've
can.
officially turned this property into the best property in town.
Wow.
And from a subjective standpoint, obviously that's subjective, and she's got a reason to tell us that. But it really felt good, man. It really felt good, because I feel like we're trying our best to do right by everybody. So
Now you mentioned something in that you want one of your goals, because clearly you had goals to get to the property. Right now you got the property. Now you have internal goals, and one of those goals was to get a police officer to rent in the property. Why was that a goal?
yeah, I think there's just a lot of intangible things that come whenever you drive up and there's a police car. It provides safety. It provides that awareness that someone is on site. That there's some nefarious activities going on. They're not going to be happening if there's a cop car out front, right?
Right.
Um, and so setting up security cameras was a huge piece of a priority of ours,
Mm-hmm.
just to provide that safety to our residents. And also and he's actually a local sheriff. It's a tertiary town. They don't have a police department, but it's a
Right.
it's a sheriff deputy. Um, but he's happy there. He does his rounds twice a week, and he gets a discounted rent, and he's totally worth it. He's a great young man. So
Yeah, that's awesome. What's really interesting is one thing you mentioned was the intangibles, like you said. And for those who are listening, it's like having that quarterback who has that leadership quality about him or her. Uh, at this point, yeah, it could be her as well. So has that leadership quality about him or her. That's what Bo is talking about when he speaks about the intangibles of having a police officer there. Much like having a fire officer, a fireman or woman there as well. Just having those things that people can't really see, but they feel when they do see it. If that makes sense. It's a little weird for me to explain it. I'm trash with analogies, but
no, that was very well put. Very well put, and you hit it. You killed that, man. Couldn't agree
appreciate
more.
it. Thanks, man. I needed that support because I feel like I stumbled through that one. So,
No, you didn't. You killed it.
one thing I wanted to ask you too, Bo. I know doing one is one thing. Did you feel like once you got that first one done, the ball really started rolling downhill? Because I feel like that's what happens with multifamily in particular.
Yeah, so I think that starting out, going back even further, right? We closed on a duplex back in early 2018, and I think that internally started a momentum ball, rolling downhill.
Right.
And man, a lot of ways to go with that ball, right?
Right.
But that gave me a lot of confidence on going through the from finding the property all the way through closing the property and the negotiations, putting it under contract, going through due diligence. You know, not all applicable to what we do in apartments,
Right.
but just getting your hands dirty gives you some confidence. Gave me a little bit of confidence, right?
Right.
And we actually bird that property, which also gave me confidence in the renovation piece. And being able to understand how banks work with, refinances and being able to pull that capital back out and reuse it was phenomenally, it was like, hey, proof of concept. I know it's a duplex, right? But I would tell anybody that's starting out, hey, you don't have to, bigger is not necessarily better if your mindset's not there. My mindset just wasn't, right?
Right.
I was doing way too much by myself. So, um, I will say that it wasn't necessarily right after the close, right? To be honest with you, Oliver, I closed on that property. Nobody even heard about it or knew about it for about 5 months because I'm not
Well-known
traditionally a
kind of guy.
social media guy.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a rather private individual, and so I've had to overcome some of that stuff as well. But once you start, I mean, now I feel like opportunity is abundant. Um, and especially we just closed on our second, and already, I mean, once people get to know that you're in the space, there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Right.
And so I mean, it is just like they say, it's a rocket ship uses 90% of its fuel to get off the ground and out of the atmosphere. And then, you're not coasting, you're still adjusting and, you're still, um, you still have to wake up every morning ready to go. But it's not as much hard work,
Right.
you know.
Right. Now, so how'd you find, so with the first property, how'd you find the first property versus how did you find the second property?
Both, I would say, are teammates, building teams. So one was with a broker. The first one was with the broker,
Okay.
developing the relationship with the broker. And I mean, whenever I say developing a relationship, he was a guy that I wanted to know. He was one of the top two and brokers in the market
Okay.
and doing a lot of great things. And I was like, Scott is the guy I want to know. How do I bring him value? How do I demonstrate that I'm worthy of his time and everything? So there was a few months of building that up, and we worked through some properties together, you know, and responding to him in a timely manner with the absolute most detailed and yet effective responses and educated responses I could
Right.
was a priority while building that relationship. And then he brought me this deal. And then the second one was, man, I've had somebody I've been chasing for a long time to partner up with on the GP side, on the general partnership side. And he just moved down from DC, and he moved down to Atlanta, suburbs of Atlanta, hit the ground running down here, and found a property in Augusta. And timing worked out really well. And he said, "Hey, Bo, you're would love for you to help out on this one if you're available." And I was like, "Jason, all day, every day. Let's go."
I
So,
love it. I love it. So you mentioned Scott a little bit earlier, and what I want to do is I want to get really down into your method of, like you said, really building that relationship with Scott. And let's start with, how did you know Scott was one of the top brokers in the area? How did you figure that out?
yeah, so it was relatively easy if you stay tuned into a market. So this is a great point, and I'm going to go off on a rabbit hole for a second and then
Please,
bring you
rabbit
back.
hole away. Rabbit hole away.
So I think that a lot of people kind of go at finding a property. It's not the way that I would approach the finding property, right? And the way I say that is I understand Southern Indiana and specifically Evansville MSA extremely well, extremely well. So
Okay.
because I know that market so well, if a property comes up, I know who the listing agent is. I know who the brokerage is. I know who the owner is most likely. I know the cap rates. I know, what a property should sell for, by the door, know our expense ratios. So understanding a market is extremely important to me. And I wouldn't just go out Oliver, you could dump a deal on my plate right now, and you go, "Hey, Dallas, Texas, this is the best deal in the world," and I'd be like, "Man, I just don't think I'm going to pursue it. I'm
Right.
sorry, I'm not your guy."
I love it.
I'm very focused in a couple markets, and that's where I have competitive advantage. So, if you brought me in a fantastic deal, I promise you I'd partner with you on that.
Oh,
Dallas
don't worry. I
style.
mean, don't sweat it. You and I both know we're already working on that piece now. We're working
I
it
know
together
we
as
are.
it is. Uh,
I know, brother. I know.
oh,
So,
that's awesome. That's
uh,
awesome. Please
so
continue.
I would say a lot of people start looking for deals, and they start looking for deals first. And I
Right.
would say you need to find a team, you need to find a market, and then once you have those two things in place, or markets, maybe two markets,
Mm,
but once you have those two things in place, then I would look for the deal.
okay.
Um, or market, and then pseudo team, because it's really hard to have a team without a project, right?
Yeah.
So, but you
Yeah.
have some people in place, you got options, and you've felt out options, right? So that's what I don't even know where we started with this one, man, but that's what I would definitely say is most important to me is
Right.
understanding where my team's in place, who's going to be on the bus, where's that bus going, and then hey, we're actually at a property that now I can actually underwrite, figure out what that deal looks like. So
Right. Now, so with that said, you mentioned just that you should know the market. For you, when you really sat down and started studying, at what point did you know, okay, I've got this market. I know this market like the back of the hand. How did you know that?
well, I know that market like the back of my hand because it's where I was born and raised, and I spent first 18 years and then many years since.
Mm-hmm.
And I would highly suggest that if someone were to look at properties, they should look in areas that they know extremely well, where they have boots on the ground, where they know extremely well, so that or uh, you know where they have a presence. Right,
Right.
me calling a broker in Dallas, Texas again, I'm nobody. I'm Joe Schmo. If I call a broker in Evansville, Indiana, even if he doesn't know me, I promise you, we're two people, away from knowing each other.
Right.
You know,
Right.
we're one point of contact away. I've got a huge family, and I'm blessed with that. And so somebody knows a family member of mine or knows the Gables.
Right.
So
Right.
um, yeah,
Yeah, the Gables are everywhere. So let's let's uh, let's backtrack a little bit. Earlier, when we were talking about the very first property you were investing in was a multifamily, a smaller multifamily, and you talked about how I think you said was it a home equity line of credit you used on that working with the bank?
no, actually, it was so I borrowed from my TSP to
Okay.
get that one.
Okay, so now let's talk about that process because that is really important, particularly for our military brothers and sisters out there who aren't quite sure how to use things like their TSP, VA, and all that stuff. Could you talk a little bit about that TSP process, how that worked, and what was your likes, dislikes, and lessons from it?
Yeah, so I would love to because without the TSP, I mean, people look at me now and they ask the question, how do you have 141 units of that? How do you own that? Where do you get
Right.
this money? And I'm like, dude, I don't have any kind of money. Like
Right.
4 years ago, I purchased, and this is the beautiful thing, Oliver,
Mm-hmm.
because of the entitlements that we have as veterans with VA loan, I've purchased two homes like that, purchased two complexes with upfront costs, and then invested in the deal, but primarily $0 overall into the deal, and purchased that duplex with a loan from my TSP
Mm-hmm.
that I then bird and got the cash back out. So
Right.
overall, all of those deals, I have very little money in them, you know. So I think that it's very tangible for somebody that obviously I had a TSP in place, but if I didn't have that TSP, I promise you there's ways to find deals or just present opportunities to people that do have some money, that would want to invest in you, building trust in those people. So um, you asked me specific about the TSP. I think
Mm-hmm.
that if I mean, I also liquidated that thing in 2020 because of where I'm at with
Right.
my methodology of what investing is, and I'm not a proponent of the stock market, even though traditionally it performs extremely well. I prefer a tangible asset class like real estate,
Yeah.
10 times out of 10.
Yeah.
So I'm very heavy into this field, and I think that's for the most part, that's who I want to put my money with too.
Right.
Somebody that absolutely believes in the asset that they're purchasing.
Yeah.
So that TSP was. a very easy process. Once I just did some Googling, did some searching, you can pull out up to 50% of what you have in there, which was enough for me. It was like $12,000, 12.5, and I partnered with my dad on the other half, and we purchased $100,000 duplex. Bought it really well, did some renovations, and then pulled the cash back out. So
Nice, nice. That's that's an awesome.
I'm
That's an
still
awesome
paying that
story.
off, by the way. I'm still paying that off, and it's a 3% interest rate that I pay to myself. So it's just that money's going to the IRA and to my IRA. So it's a rather uh, phenomenal deal.
Yeah, because
To be
what
able to
really
borrow your own money
right,
and then pay
exactly,
yourself back,
right. That's what I was gonna
with a
say.
very minimal fee
Right,
tied into it.
absolutely. Because you're basically just paying yourself back more than you are anything else, and that is just like you said. That's the best way to go about it if you can at all pull it off. So let's get into some of your mistakes, man. Let's talk about the fun stuff. All right. So in all the process, you've been through this process twice now. As far as a larger multifamily property, what has been the biggest goof up? I'd use foul language, but I'm choosing not to because it's the right thing to do. What is the biggest goof up that you've had up to this point when it comes to multifamily investing?
Hmm. No, that's a great question, man. So I've been rather fortunate, right, to not have any massive things go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think that I've been protected because I've surrounded myself by great people, right? But I will tell you, some of the things that I like to do, I'm a rather, I like to think of myself as a pretty old school guy whenever it comes to just like, I'm a man of my word.
Right.
So, a handshake to me is as important as any kind of document I'm signing, right?
Right.
And just to do right by other people. You can get into situations where either people don't follow that same belief structure, or they just, they're obviously out for their own interest, and you don't see it eye to eye. So then there's a discrepancy, and that discrepancy can go, one of two or three, four, five ways. So um, I will say that I shied away from a lawyer after a couple failures that cost me a lot of money that I didn't really have at the time. That duplex, we used a lawyer. It probably cost $1,000, for a rather. And I went through the process, and I was like, man, this is like I could have done this without
Right.
that,
Right. Yeah.
and that's not what a lawyer is necessarily for. It's not like, hey, we're going to ensure that you get the transaction done.
Mm-hmm.
There are times whenever a lawyer is absolutely necessary, especially in the commercial multifamily. Like, never would even approach this subject
Right.
without having my legal team in place, right? But I would say the biggest painful memory that I have is we got a property, that first property we got under contract, that 68 unit up in Indiana. We got it under contract at 96% occupied.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the trust and the way that I was doing it, decided, hey, we'll use this rather vanilla purchase and sale agreement
Mm-hmm.
that didn't have a whole lot of contingencies, because you can see like 22 pages of purchase and sale agreements that are just like unreal. We use
Makes you
like a
hefty.
4-page document.
Right.
Yeah, 4-page document, had all the meat, but not a lot of the icing on top. So they did not maintain occupancy at any level. So they basically, we got it under contract in October. By late December, is pretty obvious. They dipped below the 90%, and we assumed it in late January at 82% and had to evict a few folks. So that was I mean, if you would have asked me at that point, I was like, oh my God, I just failed, So it felt much heavier than what it
Right.
did. Because to be honest with you, man, everybody knows now what happened. And, 6 weeks after that was COVID shut down the economy.
Everything. Yep.
And so we were down to 72%, and we're like, all right, but March is coming. And once March hits, it's springtime. People are going to be coming to rent.
Right.
And then COVID hit, and for 2 more months, we sat at, and in the 70s, and I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, I made so many mistakes.
Right.
And then you're just getting creative and providing that value. Thankfully, we were already doing our projects that demonstrated, that we're providing value to the property and renovating units and providing a service to people. And there's definitely demand for really nice, affordable housing. So, you know, um, that would be the biggest mistake, the biggest one mistake, I believe.
I love it, man. That's first of all, let me say this. That's a testament to you. And this is from me to you. Listeners aside, anybody else listening, paying attention to aside, I don't care at this particular this very moment in time. I listened to an interview recently with Grant Cardone, and Grant Cardone said, "Courage is being courageous is just having the ability to keep going, even though you have that moment of fear." And in that story I didn't know prior to us talking. Of course, you're just telling me the story now, but I've seen your courage outside of that. You take the time to really, in the circles that we traveled in, you've made yourself super available to everybody. Your Facebook has a phone number on it. Like, my Facebook don't have any phone numbers on it. Nobody's calling me from any Facebook numbers. The fact that you have had the honesty and the openness and the ability to really be open and honest with the people that are around you and to put yourself out there is so commendable, bro. Like, I cannot tell you how dope it is to know a person of that caliber who's willing to say, listen, this is who I am. This is me. I want to talk to everybody. Everybody give me a call. Let's have a conversation. Like, you literally got on the phone, or are still in the process, I'm certain, because there's a good ton of us working with everybody in our group, in the group that we're a part of, Active Duty Passive Income, and really educating them on who you are and getting to know them as well. So I wanted to make sure I commended you and gave you your flowers while you're here.
Well, Oliver, I'll just say, man, that means a lot, first off. So I appreciate that very much.
My pleasure.
Secondly, you should have done that in private because I'm blushing now on camera. Uh, but no, man, to be perfectly honest with you, I will bring this up though, because it's a good point, because I want to be transparent. I want to be, fully accessible.
Yep.
I read that Mark Cuban like answers 1,000 emails a day, and I'm like, I'm going to strive to be like that guy. And just whenever you have a main job as demanding as the Army can be, and whenever you have two kids at home and third on the way, and you have a wife that you also care for very much, and you're working the real estate thing, like, you have to prioritize. And I'll tell you right now, man, one of my inefficiencies, one of my choke points is there's a lot of people that will contact me, and I feel like there's times whenever I'm not super receptive, and then
Right.
I'll forget and don't have that system in place.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely been growing pains, right? In
Absolutely.
times that I haven't shown up, and that's not something that I'm okay with, but it's definitely, if I'm going to err in one way, I hope people are understanding of that,
Yeah.
at a lot of times. So
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I feel sometimes I wish I had a CRM for my entire life, because that that is hands down. Because I know exactly how you feel. You get home from work, I know I've got to do an interview, I've got to do this, I've got to call this guy, I've got to talk to this broker, I've got to shoot an email to this lawyer, and you get home and you're chasing your kids around, and by the time you look up after bath time, it's like 8 o'clock. You're like, oh, I got a couple hours. I gotta be back up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get to work. And it's like,
for
good
sure.
grief, man. So I totally understand and sympathize with you on that. So let's get into the questions. Let's get into my core three, if you will. We've just moved it to three. For those of you who's listening, it was originally two. I added a new one. So don't judge me, just enjoy. All right, so number one, we're gonna do troop to task. Troop to task is where you give the person who's listening one thing that they can do to move their life forward in the same direction that, or the same path that you're on, or how you started. Go for it.
I would say, if I were to give one thing to somebody that's starting out that is looking to kind of model, I would say seek to build momentum. And like momentum, you should not be looking for deals. You should not be, I mean, you should be. You should not be looking to be the most knowledgeable person. You should seek to build momentum on a daily basis and make yourself slightly better every single day in every aspect. And as you build that momentum, I promise you, sooner or later, that will transpire into something. It will become something of reality, even though it is not evident on a daily basis.
I love it.
Right. It took me 2 years of a grind, so.
Ooh. All right. Number 2, situational awareness, where you give the listener something they can read or a website they can go to where they can learn more about multifamily.
This is I'm going to say this on every single time that I talk to people and they ask me a great question like this, but I read from it daily, man, so I can't forget about it. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill is my all-time favorite book,
Classic.
and it within it, there's a self-confidence formula, and I read that every day. And it's basically memorized at this point, but it's something that has been extremely helpful for me to kind of visualize and understand what auto suggestion is, and just reframe my brain on a daily basis to seeking the good and positive, and establishing that positive mental attitude. So
Nice. Most millionaires that I have met up to this point have all had a routine or something that they continually reaffirm in themselves and in their life, and that is by far one of the better ones that I've heard. And no offense to any of the others, don't get mad at me. I'm sorry, but that is that is a really really good one because it's something that everybody can look at and read and really take in. All right, last question. Last question. This is the tougher one of all the questions. What question do you wish you were asked more often?
Oliver, I really do commend you, man, because that is a tough one. It's a tough one, and it's also a really, really good one. I'll say this:
Okay.
if you are authentic, because without authenticity, this doesn't matter for nothing.
Pennies, right?
Okay. Yeah. So if you are authentic and asking the simple question, how can I provide value to you? It is very powerful. Right. And I think that whenever people genuinely ask that question, that is the start. That can be the start of a really good relationship. And so whenever people ask that question and then they back it up a few times, it's pretty evident that they're a values based person or they're abundant mindset.
Right.
And those are the people that, they will attract other successful, abundant minds
Minds.
to them. And so I would say that that's the question that if anybody asks, I'm like immediately, all right, you know, put that in my pocketbook.
I love it. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, Bo, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on, man. This has been an absolute pleasure. It's always been a pleasure to talk to you, but in this particular instance, it's even more so. I'm looking forward to bringing you back on at some point to talk more about stuff we've done together and the fun we've had doing it. So for now, again, I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you next time. For those of you listening, we appreciate you tuning in, listening. Where can they find you, Bo? Where can they get in contact with you if they want to reach out?
Hey, brother, LinkedIn is the best way. Again, I will be much more active than I've been in the past month and a half while we're going through due diligence and whatnot,
Right.
and trying to raise some capital for a deal. But LinkedIn is definitely Bo Gable. Look me up and please reach out. Again, I'm rather loose with my cell phone number because I am always looking to, connect with people that are actually trying to better themselves and surround themselves with like-minded individuals. So please feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. I got my email or my phone in there. So
Let's go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Oliver Perry. You can reach me at the Oliver Perry on IG, at the Oliver Perry on TikTok, the Oliver Perry on Facebook as well, and YouTube. So again, we appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you next time.